hear your research as well, because I'm in the throes of creating a program, trying to create a workshop that people can sort of take, understand, and then run themselves. And the idea being that can they then create a group themselves that becomes accountable to that group? So yeah, anything that you've got, I'd love to hear as well, because I'm trying to formulate that at the moment.
Yeah, tell me a bit about your company and how it got started.
Yeah, cool. So 100 Mind Tokens the mission is to redefine the way the world drinks alcohol. So I started it in the UK, which has very similar drinking habits to Australia, where I live now. I'm from Australia originally. And yeah, it really just started out as a personal mission because I was drinking way too much, working in a high pressure tech role at a scaling company. For anyone not tech related, I guess a scaling company is when they've taken on a large chunk of investment, or if they're making a lot of money and I guess you know all about this. I don't really need to do that. But yeah, anyway, so scaling company, so it was a lot of high pressure, and working big hours, and I was using alcohol as the crutch, right? And I realized I'd actually taken on a charity project to work with the Premier League, which is the biggest soccer league in the world. On top of that job, and I was kind of in the throes of having sponsors and people relying on me, and these kids wanting their high school painted, and I was like, oh my God, and I was leaning on alcohol too much, and basically I just decided to redesign the way that I was drinking by keeping myself accountable to myself. But the way I did it, because I knew I was notorious for not sticking to things, was I wrote a blog, and it wasn't that this blog went viral. It was just that it seemed like all of my friends and family through Facebook and other social media had seen it, and they were all suddenly aware that I was doing it. Which made it, I was like, oh, okay, well, there's no backing out now. And all I committed to was, I created these rules, which were the 100 Mind Tokens rules. And I said, I'm sick of drinking pretty much every night. I'm going to give myself 2 tokens a week, which means I could drink twice a week, which was 101 over the whole year. And every time I drank, I would say whether it was worth it or not the next day in an effort to retrain.
Can you do those drinks? Like, how many drinks can you have? Is it just
many
one?
As one.
Oh, so then you could just get like hammered then.
Exactly. But think about it. If you do that, then do you wake up the next day and say it was worth it?
I stopped at a certain point where
you
process it as you get older.
So if you're so I always say, like, because that's what everyone says. They're like, oh, well, you go out and get hammered. And yeah, sure. A lot of people do, because they go, oh, I'm going to make this count. But what they realize is that making it count isn't getting written off, blacking out, throwing up, doing all the dumb stuff that comes with like trying to, get as much in it. When people realize that actually the most important thing that happens when they're out drinking is social connection. It's enjoying the time. It's waking up the next day with like vitality and wanting to use the day. So once you start to reprogram your brain, because we all need to do that, especially with habits, right? We need to reprogram what it's like to be the drinker that I want to be. And for some people now, it basically means that they reprogram that they don't want to drink anymore. But for the most people that I work with now, I guess I've jumped ahead here as an alcohol coach and with my online community, is that they just want to figure out, how does drinking align to the person that I want to be? So what's my why for being here in the first place, and also who am I showing up for? Which has always got to be yourself first and foremost, which is part of my practice and teaching. But who are those important pillars in your life that'll make you change a habit?
Did you ever find yourself doing more than 2 tokens and kind of cheating?
Yeah. So, I mean, the 100 Mind Tokens, the great thing about it is that you could have, like, I went to a wedding that year and I went to Barcelona for a week. And so you can sort of regulate. You can go, okay, well, I'm not going to drink for 13 days and then I'll drink for 5. And when I say drink for 5, that was like a couple of beers with tappers, and then maybe a bit of a bigger night here and there. That first year I did it, 80% of my nights were worth it out of 101. So I was like roughly 80 or 81%. Yeah. So there was 20 that I still stuffed up. And then for the following years, I probably got harsher on what a screw up is. And I guess my why's changed because I've been doing it for 4 years myself. And I've been around the 90% mark. So there's still, it could take like one beer and then a lot of other things go wrong that night. for me to go, that drink wasn't worth it. It didn't contribute to that night at all. So you can continually level yourself up. And this kind of self-inquiry, this accountability to yourself is really important. But I guess for your work, it's like, well, where else am I being accountable? Like, you've got to be accountable to yourself, but then how can I bring someone along for the ride? How can I have a community as well that's going to support me through this transition? Because we were all essentially in a transition. Yeah.
So did you ever deal with somebody that how did you come up with 101?
Because I was drinking, I worked it out. I was laying there and I was like, I tried to find a community that already was doing mindful drinking, and I couldn't find one. There was like Alcoholics Anonymous, which is kind of that gray area where most social drinkers probably find themselves at different points in their life where they go, I could really do with some help here, but there's just not a lot out there. There's some great organizations in Australia actually that aren't AA, that are more conversational, and I love those guys, and there's some good ones in the States and elsewhere. But yeah, there wasn't any that were like, I just wanted to create my own rules essentially, which was you can drink as much as you want. It was kind of, I wanted to test myself, and it was really based off Tim Ferriss, the entrepreneur's kind of his approach to life, that this is all just one big experiment. When you start thinking through that lens, your whole life changes, because now since I did that, I've been experimenting to the point where now I'm working with universities and doing studies. So that's a very new thing for me. That's only the past couple of months. But yeah, I'm like, it's a whole new world of like how you actually do a professional study that can be reviewed and has, yeah.
That's exciting. So what happens with the people that let's say they didn't plan out their year, and I'm assuming that you got 101 just because it's like almost 1/3 of the year. And let's say they didn't plan it out and they're out of tokens by half the year. Do they slip, or how do you get them to?
So I should have mentioned 101 was kind of like, it's the name now. But everyone defines what they'll be proud of, because not everyone drinks 5 nights a week and wants to change to 2. Some people drink 2 nights a week, and they're actually, some people, so there's kind of a few use cases. Some people drink 5 nights a week and maybe they'll do 101. So the first year I actually did it, which was no technology, no business, no nothing. It was just with 91 friends and family who after 2016, I did it. I showed all the benefits of, I saved 8,000 Australian, which is probably like 5.5 US. I put on 6 kilos of muscle and lost all the fat that I had in London. I went traveling a bunch, so people were seeing me traveling. Obviously, that's kind of the Instagram lifestyle, right? And then I'd also, I was just getting out more. Like, I was doing more physical activity. I was cycling, and so just essentially all the things that especially when it comes up to New Year's resolution time, basically I did a little thing, which was like, here's the 8 things that the UK values most for New Year's resolutions. And number 7 was drinking less, which I would say drinking mindfully is more what they're getting at. And by doing that one thing, the cascade or the downstream effect was that all the other 7 out of the 8 I ticked off in some way, shape or form. So I was eating better. I was fitness. I was saving money. I was, all these things. So that was kind of a cool thing. And so, these 91 people signed up, and it was interesting because I said, you guys get to pick how many tokens you get. And I think it was something like 95% picked 101. And I don't know whether that was just because they'd seen me do it and were like, oh, that sounds like a good number. Twice a week, doable. And then some of it, one girl picked 152. And then the rest, there's 3 or 4 that picked like 52. And then a couple picked like 24. So there was this, it was basically like, what are you going to be proud of? And then so now we do it in shorter bursts, because people committing to a whole year is great. And we still do a push around New Year's Eve. But when I go into businesses, it's more applicable that they do an 8-week turnaround, which is really 4 weeks of drinking exactly how you normally drink. Don't do anything different. And this is the same with my private coaching. And then after that, we either do 4 to 8 weeks of being cognizant and setting a target and reviewing and being really like aware. But the reality is, after the first phone call and the first time that someone picks up their phone, uses the app and puts in a token, their brain's going, how do I make this worth it tonight? Without me teaching them anything, they go, okay, I don't really need, I know what a good night out is in my head. Once they get past that point of like getting smashed and whatever the different terminologies are, they come to realize the importance of like good social connection, like I mentioned before, and all the rest.
But in your case, because I have been through your situation where you're going through like stress and it's like maybe you don't have time to exercise because you're so damn tired because you're working crazy. So then use alcohol or something like that. So what happens if you're dealing with a person that is dealing with high stress and then they're just like, how they change that habit of stress equals drink instead of stress equals something else?
Yeah, so they need to identify the triggers of their stress, where that's coming from. So, they need to, and usually it comes out when you ask them to define their why. So because a lot of the time someone will have like a personal why and they'll have a business why. And usually it's one of those two, there's some stress in there. And once you identify the triggers of, this happens, then what's the habit, the habit loop? That's a good,
so James something.
What's his name?
Trigger reward.
James Clear spoke about it in Atomic Habits, but the guy who invented it was something else. Maybe his name's James as well. Anyway, the cue reward. And so basically when you identify that trigger, it's about how do I transition from reaching for the bottle to something that aligns to where I want to be in the next 8 to 12 weeks or the next 12 months, depending on how long you're doing the program. And when you start aligning it and when you've got a really strong why, then even when you get pressures from outside, people come in and say, because I always say to people, if you say, I'm changing my alcohol habits to save money, people are going to buy you tequila at the bar, or they're going to just be like, whatever, you can, and rubber arms, right? But if you say, I'm saving money because I'm saving up so I can take my kids on a holiday because I haven't spent enough time with them because I'm at work so much, and my kids are the most important thing in my life, and me seeing them thrive and be fulfilled and me showing up my best for them, you know what I mean? You're creating this narrative. And when you believe that, because that's where it's kind of hidden, when you believe that and when you explain that to someone else, I say that if someone then tries to shove a tequila down your throat, they're not your friend. If you've got a strong enough why. And they're usually, and a lot of the time they're probably dealing with their own shit, and people essentially like a lot of the time are reflecting back at you what's wrong with, they take it personally when you decide to change your drinking habits.
And did you find when you had a community, it was really hard, it was easier to stick with things?
Oh yeah, for me, for sure. When I did it the first year, it was kind of like I got to the point of, you need to do this. Otherwise you let down so many people. So I didn't really realize I was letting myself down until later. That first year, it was my why was, you need to run this charity project. Otherwise you're letting down kids, you're letting down a football club, you're letting down, and you will crumble under this amount of work. You just freak out. I never got to the point at a job where I was like actually to the point of maxing out. Having said that, I maxed out later that year because the work was just so heavy. It was the job. So I sort of shifted drinking habits, but the job was just, it was a crap job. Anyway, I love the people. Never stay in a job because you love the people. I learned that lesson. At that point, that was my motivator, was thinking about other people. But as I came to sort of guide other people through it, I was kind of noticing that, when you put your family first, you don't put yourself first, that's probably when you do stuff like drink. Because you're like, I'm doing everything for them, they're most important, and then you can't show up your best for that. You can't show up your best for your kids if you're not showing up your best for yourself.
And have you used this for kind of like your system of accountability in groups for anything else in your life?
Well, I did some training. So like it's kind of led me on this path, and I did some training with the Flow Genome Project. So they're a really cool organization in the States, and definitely worth looking up. And so I guess I've learnt through going through their program, because I was never a trained coach, right? I just kind of fell into it. I didn't even, when I first started my online programming, I threw up on a whim 3 times coaching sessions, and pretty expensive. And I was like, no one's going to buy that. Anyway, people bought it, and I was like, oh crap, now I'm coach. So I didn't really, so after that I went, okay, well, I'm okay at this because I'd already been doing it with the group informally. And so I know what to say, but I didn't know a lot about diving into like how getting into a better like understanding of why people do things, habitual stuff. So when you talk about like, I guess, James Clear and the kind of this habit loop, and then into developmental change, which is like deep-seated things that have happened to us through childhood, especially when it comes to alcohol. It's like, did you get your dad a beer from the fridge when you were 3 years old? Did you have these, that's common in Australia. I don't know about the States, but like there's, when did you start drinking? Was it a bit rebellious? Was it something that you did to rebel initially? Usually because, the drinking age is 18 or 21, depending on where you are. And yeah, so that becomes more of an interesting situation. Like, who are the people you're around drinking and stuff? So through their training, which is interesting about accountability, they work closely, or they have worked closely with ex-Navy SEALs. And so their training, which is really interesting around accountability, is it's not Jocko Willink, it's the other guy, Mark Divine. Mark Divine's so it's Jocko Willink is the number one military person, whatever you call it, military influencer in the world.
And then the one with a book, I think. Right?
Yeah, they're both, I think, got books. And then Mark Divine's second. And my friend Steve Kuhn, which I could introduce you to, he's the third. So, and when you hear the way they speak, you can see how that they're aligned to what they've learnt in, regimented lifestyles. And with specifically Mark Divine, he's influenced the Flow Genome Project. So when I did my training, we started out in a group of 72. It was really cool, collaborative, group flow, because the Flow Genome Project is all about flow and cohesion. And so then we broke down into groups of 8, and they were the Navy SEALs call boat teams. So, they're the guys that you do anything for. That's your family, right? And then you've got swim buddies, which is you and your other person. And so in terms of accountability in battle, you want someone to have your back the whole time, right? So you've got your 2 that you're always looking for your swim buddy, or you're always aware of where your swim buddy is, but you're also aware of your 8 in that platoon as well, or however many it is. I think when it gets Dunbar's number, I think that's too high, but in a military sense. But when it gets above too high, you can't really have group flow and group cohesion. And so the book Stealing Fire is worth reading because it's got a lot about group flow.
What is the book called? Wow, yeah, I'd never heard of it.
Stealing Fire. So that's
Stealing Fire.
Jamie Wheal, Stephen Kotler. I'd highly recommend you read that because, and especially about the stuff on group flow. And also Group Genius is a really good book. Keith Sawyer.
Wow.
Because in one way or another, if you want to have a cohesive group, you need psychological safety, and you need to understand the structures of dropping into group flow. Whatever you call it, it's that moment when everyone is just going, bah, bah, bah. It's what Keith Sawyer talks about improv theater. And so it's when you're in a meeting, and he parallels like improv theater and jazz musicians, right? No one really knows what's coming next, but somehow you go and you watch those things and you're like, and they're just buzzing. And so they parallel that to being in a business room. It's like if you're sitting there and someone's saying no, like, no, that's wrong, you're wrong. There's no group flow. That's abrasive and it's terrible. We've all been there, right? Whether business or at home. But when people start to say yes and, which is improv, then that's when you get this kind of knock-on effect. No, that's right. And so it's yes and, or this, and like, oh yeah, that kind of sparks me up. And you might be in a way disagreeing, but you're like opening up a different space for that person to see into, and then build on it and go from there. So that's I guess when you're talking about cohesive groups and accountability, group flow for me is it's my favorite type of flow. There's obviously like flow that you can get into as an individual. But that's for me, that's where the jam is.
Wow. And so now you're doing this for organizations.
So with our group, which is 5 of them are in Australia and the rest are overseas. We've done a couple of events. So that's been fun. So I haven't done any specifically for organizations. I have with my company 101 Tokens. So I've done workshops. I've done yeah, I've run group work, which has been interesting online as well. So I'd much rather run workshops face to face, but obviously, you know, I don't really live in a city anymore. So it suits me. And so, yeah, we've done that.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
You're doing this full time?
Yeah, 101 Tokens is my full-time job. But then I'm also trying to do more in the flow state space. And then also the ecological crisis, which is basically, you know, climate change. I've got
a big one right
project now. I'm working on. Yeah, I'm working on a project with some friends who live an hour from here. And really, if I'm honest, that's where I need to be focusing most of my attention. But it's all linked, right? So if you think about shifting alcohol habits, the reason why people don't recycle or give a shit about their local community is because they're probably hyper stressed at work, and then they're drinking, which means that their spare time they're either spent drinking or they're hungover, so they're kind of useless. Some people are functioning alcoholics, and you can debate that to the hills on whether that's good or not. But anyway, yeah, so it's all linked. So if you can get people to unblock, and it's not just alcohol, if you can get them to think more about their vices, whether that's overeating, whether that's digital addiction, whether it's you know, clothing, everything. So anything that's kind of like is fun, spikes dopamine, but when done in the wrong way, usually overconsumed, it becomes a negative. It creates like tension and trauma and grief and shame. Then that's a state where people can't show up for themselves, or let alone show up for the planet and do the stuff that we really need to do as individuals and as organizations. So yeah, while I'm focusing on the ecological crisis and projects with some amazing people and companies, I'm also acutely aware that we need to have these conversations around health optimization, vice optimization. Yeah.
There's a study I have it. I actually used it. Haven't used it in a while, but essentially, people were trying to do, I think it was solar panels, and they were trying to do it in the community, and they were saying, oh, you can save so much money, all of this stuff. Nobody was willing to change. But once they started telling, oh, your neighbor actually started using it, and then they actually saved this much for the planet, everyone else started using it. So it's almost like the social pressure.
Yeah.
I don't know what that study was, but it was fascinating. So it's kind of using other people to make the change happen. Because as an individual, you don't feel like you're making that change in, I guess, in the environment. But when you start seeing the whole community showing up, then it's different. I'll see if I can
find it.
It's
kind of like, I don't know if this is a term or not. It sounds like micro influencer marketing. So rather than, you know, your Instagram with 1 million followers movie star, it's your neighbor next door who's influencing your purchasing decisions. Yeah, and that's great. I think, yeah, the conversation with, which we're playing around with now, is it needs to be financially viable. Doesn't matter how good it is for the planet. Most people need to see that there's a financial benefit out the back of them doing the thing. So whether it's growing their own food, it's like, yeah, you will save $1,000 a year or something like that. Everyone needs to know where it becomes beneficial, and that's the tough part, because a lot of the time.
I'm gonna have to send you that study then, because they tried to do it that way and it didn't work. Nothing got them motivated for the financial, because maybe the people are dealing with efficiency or whatever comes up, but it's a social pressure. So it goes back to social pressure and belonging, being community. I gotta find it. It's fascinating.
It sounded like it was social pressure coupled with, like, because if John's done it, it would have been interesting from a scientific perspective, and maybe they did this. John's done it, but he's not making any money. He's just doing it because he loves the planet and the society, versus John's done it and he's saving $100 a month, sort of thing. Because then you're really proving if it's socially motivated rather than financially.
Well, they pitched it first as financial, like, oh, put this solar panel, you'll save this. Nothing worked. But then when they combined it with like the social, where this person's doing it, then it started working. Then everyone changed because they didn't want to be left out.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's the recipe for it. Yeah, it's like the knock-on effect, the ripple effect. And so in your work, in terms of accountability and bringing groups together, is that something that you're factoring in terms of, you know, how can we apply financial gain with social cohesion and accountability?
No. So I've been an athlete since I was 14, and if you think about a sport, you always have somebody. You have a coach to kind of like coach you, your blind spots. You have teammates that even if they're direct competitors, they're always pushing you out of your comfort zone, right?
Yep.
And then you can share your challenges so you improve. So as your people get better, you get better, right? Such a common thing. And I was like, why don't people have this in business? Why don't people have this in life? And then I started realizing that I was doing this naturally. And then people would just be like, wait, why aren't you, like, how are you doing this? I'm like, what do you mean? And what I noticed is a lot of people try to put their own groups together, but there's no rules. So you have to have hard rules. You have to kind of surrender. So for example, there's one, I've done this in a couple of ways. One where we did it with businesses. Another one we did it for, I was like dating up a storm. And then I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to settle down now. And whatever I was doing wasn't working before. So I put a whole group of people so I could actually settle down. And then I got married. But it was fascinating. People were like, what? And I was like, first I had to like understand what my values were, get them challenged, and then do whatever this group of people told me to do. And then they held me accountable on like when I wanted to default, it ended up, because defaulting being like, I like to, like something goes wrong, I like to swipe left really quickly, you know, not deal with it. And they were like, can't swipe, like this isn't going to work for you. And then they would move me past them. So even if when I was doing a half Ironman, just anything in my life, I always put a group together.
Okay.
I was like, more people need to put groups together. And then how can we put it where they just do it for anything?
Yeah. And how can you make it as easy as possible and simple to connect? I think you'll love the Keith Sawyer book. I think that'll really...
What is it called?
Because it's
Soy book?
No, you'll love Keith Sawyer's book, that Group Genius.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's because it's structure without structure. It'll make sense. It's kind of like, if you want to have... You still need to have some form of structure, but the best results that he found for specific things came from allowing people to have agency within the structure, but still moving towards a goal. Yeah.
I do like structure though. I believe when you don't have it, then that's when it falls apart. And then I believe that there has to be an outsider. Either there's two ways of doing a group. One is like there's somebody paid to facilitate and then everyone's doing it, or that one person who really, it goes back to their why. Why are they doing this? And then they build kind of an advisory board. And by the way, writing a book, I joined a group. And the guy wants me to, the coach is challenging me to talk about mentors and how mentorship doesn't work.
Okay.
So I'm kind of like, okay, well, we'll see about that. Because I have everything else kind of like thought out, written stories and everything. And the mentor one, I was like, he's like, there's so much research how mentorship doesn't work. Interesting, right? I haven't really kind of gone into it, but basically a mentor is just like telling you where it doesn't, it's like kind of reading a book. And if you don't implement it, what happens? Nothing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like we're in a bit of a self-help trough at the moment where everyone's just buying every self-help book or doing every training online and they're not actually implementing. So nothing gets done. My mum does that. She reads heaps of stuff, or she'll see the next YouTube clip and then she'll, got to get their book. And I'm like, well, have you implemented any of the last 3 books that you've read? No. It's like, no, you're not reading any more books. You got to go back and just start implementing because they're wonderful to read and they sound fantastic and they feel like they're speaking to you, but until you actually take action. I think that's why it's funny though with mentorship, isn't it? Because I think like I'd be interested to hear what you find, because I'm like, well, the best mentors just really help you get to the answer, like ask you questions to get you there. So you get there yourself. But then, I think for me, I like to have people setting me like, cracking the whip a bit more like a sports coach. Did you do your training? Like, why haven't you done this kind of thing? So I think it's different personality types respond differently to different types of mentors and coaching. But I'd love to read some stuff on why mentorship doesn't work.
Yeah, I'll send you some books and things as I'm going through it. And then what's interesting is as I was interviewing people, the people that were in the interviews that were unhappy and more like introverts were the ones that they believed that they were the only ones who could do everything. And they didn't like asking for help. So I don't know if I'm going to share those stories because I don't want to call them out on it, but it was kind of fascinating, like the unhappiness. Yeah.
You don't have to directly call their name out. You can definitely reference, like, you know, yeah, I don't know. It's up to you. It's your book, but I would say, like, if it's an important thing that people need to know and it adds to the piece of the pie, it's worth chucking in there for sure.
And how come you haven't written a book? It sounds like you have an amazing story.
I'm writing one with my partner. We're trying to write one like this. We're going away on holiday next week and we've written a structure. And I don't think it'll be like a traditional book. I think it's just around how to ask better questions. Because we did long distance for like 8 months and we discovered that when you pick up the phone and you say, "How are you?" it's just the most bland question and people just no one resonates. It's like when you walk past someone and you say, "How are you?" and they go, "Good." And then they just no one gave a shit about the conversation. Yeah, that's right. And so, so we developed like different ways to ask better questions and then we sort of dived into it. And then, so we're just going to create that because we've been guiding, because she coaches as well, been guiding like not only our clients, but our friends and family on this stuff, like how to have set up ritual and have really good conversations each week, checking in with each other on the most important things. That's what we're writing. But I've also written a few chapters on a guide to vice optimization, which is kind of this concept I created, which is basically the structures and the systems around 101 tokens and how they can be applied to, food, clothing, all sorts of things.
That's amazing. Well, if you're looking, I just joined this group. I can send you the information. Basically, it's where is he? He's a professor. He's a serial entrepreneur, sold 2 companies, and now he's a professor at I forgot the name of the school. I can't believe. It's a really good school in DC. And he partnered up with another company that's like a digital like publishing company. So he goes through these interesting, like tells you how books are, like quickly how to do the books, how to kind of put hooks, the writing, everything. You're in a group of people. They give you an editor. So it's a person who you have weekly calls with, and then have you do interviews and they get you through like a hypothesis. Cause I knew exactly what I wanted to write. He's like, no, you got to go in there and think about it like the book Outliers, which I love the book Outliers. And it's about stories about other people. And then you go in there with a hypothesis and then you see if your hypothesis works. And I was like, okay. And then you can decide to go with a publisher, or it looks like this group, what they do is it's almost like they're trying to change a publishing world. So instead of self-publishing, they're doing it almost like in the sense of a Kickstarter. So you kind of get momentum.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. I can totally share with you. I know that I work with like more, because I've said I wanted to write a book before, and then I was like, oh, well, what is my priority? Why?
Yep.
This is great. Anyway, I can support you or help you out or connect you with anybody?
Yeah, likewise. Let me know as well. Maybe it'd be good to speak to Derek and Steve Kuhn might be a good chat. He's fascinating. You can listen to him on my podcast if you want to check him out before you do listen to him. But I think just with his military and also his business partner, Lane Balone, he's ex-Special Forces. So they've got really interesting perspectives on the cross between business and obviously military life.
And how has like the podcast impacted you doing podcasts? Has it helped your business?
I've like recorded way more podcasts than I've released. So I've like, cause I like to do the talking. I haven't got it to a point where I had a producer for a while, and then, so it's not, people every now and then will say, oh, hey, I saw your podcast. It was really cool and stuff. But I haven't noticed any like leads come through because the podcast isn't related to health optimization. It's more related to conversation. It's actually related to mentorship. It's related to, basically like who do people learn off, that makes them exceptional is it in a nutshell. and then how do they approach getting in touch with those people? And so that's what I'm fascinated about. So I truly believe that like anyone, as long as they set the intention and they have a good enough reason and they can figure out something that's mutually beneficial, can contact anyone in the world and one day get 5 minutes with them or something like that at least, and potentially collaborate with them. Yeah. So
there's a book that just came out. It's called The Third Door. Did you hear about it?
Yeah, I read that. Yeah. Alex Benoit.
He's a good writer. Yeah. He's a really good writer. It flowed like smoothly. I was surprised.
Yeah, I bought that book for three different people.
Oh, really? Yeah, because that's basically what you were talking about, like how he just kept on, and it's amazing.
So funny because
you're super passionate about a number of things.
Yeah, I like it's like sometimes be a downfall, but I realize just to accept the fact that I get bored really easily, so I have to I like to do lots of different things. Sometimes that gets me in trouble, but it's fun, and like, why not? If you can get away with it, then yeah, I'll keep doing it. But I am like I said, I'm becoming more aware that my focus is on the ecological stuff. But the great thing about the company that we've started up is that our model is to drop in, help people with a design problem, a design sprint, and then give them a strategy and a solution really quickly. So we work on really cool projects, but we're not sort of stuck down in the trenches, more strategic thinking. And so that's really cool. And it's really exciting, but it'll be an interesting one to see how I transition into that. 2020 will be interesting.
Well, any way I can support you, like network or connect you with anybody, please feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for your time.
No worries. When do you think you'll release your book? Because maybe I can have you on my podcast, and then like just before it, or whenever you're doing your marketing for it, or something like that.
Yeah,
that'd be really cool.
Planning March, so
Sweet.
We will see. Because I'm also pregnant right now.
All right. Okay.
So I'm writing a book as I'm pregnant and doing my business. So I have a little bit of a timeline, and we'll see how it goes. And that's been a journey too. So that was kind of like I put a whole group together for that. Because cool. I didn't do I did it through like the whole IVF, and so anytime something's challenging, I just put a group together.
What's the group? Okay, so what's your like when you put a group together, do you go, okay, I need this many people and I need these type of people, or you just you let the universe decide? You put it out there and then
I pick the people for sure.
Okay, so you pick the people. Okay, and how many? And do you max out on a certain number? Like, do you say this is how many people we need?
I try to do 5.
Okay. Yep. Cool. All right.
And then I go down to like I have a whole process of like, why am I doing this? What type of people do I need? Because you don't want somebody that's exactly like you. Because you're almost kind of like gathering more information, right?
I wonder if you'd be interested in, like, for the book, a case study, because the ecological group that we've created, we basically came together with I've known 2 of the 5 of them for a long time. It's interesting because it was 5 of us, right? And in 3 weeks, we made, climate change the number 1 search topic ever in Australian history.
Oh, wow.
Just through identifying an interesting way to position the politics and the election. And so that was like a 5 people going hard for 3 weeks while also working on their own projects, independently located. So we weren't in the same city. And yeah, our Trump got in, I guess, backs coal and all that kind of stuff. But we did really well, and it's a really interesting case study. But we burnt out really badly, so that might be an interesting thing to talk about as well. When you're in a group, is like, how do you avoid burnout?
Why do you think you burnt out?
We went way too hard. Like we built an army of people to spread the message, and we got mainstream press and we did all this stuff, but we were just kind of like we were doing quite a technical thing, and people were contesting what we were doing because we were ranking the politicians and their parties in terms of who was best for the environment, and it was peer reviewed. But when you do stuff like that, and that was for 151 constituencies, so when you do stuff like that, you get people going, hey, why am I above why am I below that person? They do this, like they're cruel to animals. And so basically social media just goes through the roof. So yeah, we weren't really prepared for that. So the preparation wasn't there for it to be as big as what it was. And so when that happens, when you don't do the upfront thinking, because, there was no time, there was 3 weeks, that stuff happens. But you learn. That's what's great about it. And so burnout is like one of the first things we address when we pick up a project now.
Yeah, building support, right, around that, and getting a group of people and enrolling people. Have you ever done Landmark?
No, it sounds familiar.
Landmark in Australia? Yeah, they do.
It's an event, isn't it?
It's a 3-day event.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's like 3 parts to it. The first part is a forum where it's like really all about you. And it's probably some stuff that you learned, because everything's kind of, I would say, recycled in some ways of Buddhism and a bunch of other stuff. And they all kind of put their own terminology. The second one is the advanced course, which is all about group. And then the third one is called SELP, which is, I forgot what the acronym stands for. And that's when you put a community project, and the goal is to have the community project run without you.
Yes. Okay. That's great.
And so you might find that fun, because what part of it is like, well, at least at the SELP, is they teach you how to kind of enroll people in the why. So next time, I don't know the whole details of what you're doing, but next time you have a project like that, or you want to go about it, first you got to come up with your why, which you probably did, and then enroll beyond the 5 people, enroll a bunch of like community to support you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that's a good way to avoid the burn. Yeah. And then they're just excited to participate. So you don't even have to pay them, because it's just an amazing cause.
Yeah, well, that was the way that worked. There was no funding. That's why it was amazing that we managed to shift it. Like, there was other people doing stuff, but it went from, it was really interesting to watch, and we had no funding. So it was, next time we'll have funding and we'll hire.
2020, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Hopefully before that, but 2020 is going to be interesting. But I've got to bounce, but it's been fantastic to speak to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time again.
No worries. And if you need anything, let me know.
I appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.
Ciao.